Venom is arguably the most iconic and well-known villain in Spider-Man's rogues gallery.
We are Venom.
It seems pretty likely that Venom will show up in an MCU Spider-Man film at some point, although the relationship between Sony and Disney complicates that appearance somewhat. Thankfully, though, there are plenty of real-world and in-universe clues hinting at Venom showing up in Far From Home, and today's video is going to cover them all. Eagle-eyed Marvel Cinematic Universe fans will have spotted Tom Holland's Peter Parker crawling around in a black spider suit in the Far From Home trailers. There are a lot of theories pointing to the origins of this suit currently floating around. Thankfully, they're all pretty fun, and any of them proving true will greatly enhance the film. Many speculate that this suit is just a more tactical version of his usual costume given to him by Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury.
So nice to finally meet you, Spider-Man.
Others think that this suit could be a nod to Spider-Man Noir. This interpretation of Spider-Man appeared in the Sony-produced film Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and was extremely well received. It makes sense for Disney to capitalize on this popularity and include at least a reference to the character in Far From Home.
Surprise attack!
Others still believe that this is the MCU's Peter Parker wearing the symbiote spider suit that leads to the creation of Venom as a character. While any of these theories could prove true, it's undeniable that a black spider suit is primarily tied to Venom in the public perception. When production for 2018's Venom film really started picking up, those involved with the project at Sony said there was a chance Tom Holland's Peter Parker could be in the film. Those executives said that doing so would not violate the agreement between Disney and Sony that allows Spider-Man to be in the MCU. While neither Tom Holland nor any version of Peter Parker appeared in the Venom movie, it nevertheless got people talking. Both Disney and Sony have been pretty quiet about the details of their deal that lets Spider-Man appear in the MCU, despite Sony owning the film rights to the character. These remarks run counter to that, though, and it seems like characters can appear in any movie so long as both parties agree to it. This means that Venom, specifically Tom Hardy's portrayal of Eddie Brock and the anti-hero, could appear in Far From Home if Sony's okay with it.
I have a parasite.
The success of the 2018 Venom film was both utterly shocking and tremendous. Although it only cost about $115 million to make, the movie made about $855 million in the worldwide box office. That's a ludicrous amount of money for a movie featuring a side character in the Spider-Man franchise when Spider-Man himself doesn't even show up. It's clear that Sony has a cash cow on their hands, and we can expect them to milk it for all it's worth. Sony's going to try to do anything they can to keep Venom socially relevant and audiences coming back for sequel films. An easy way to do this is to have the character, either Tom Hardy or the symbiote, cameo in Spider-Man Far From Home. This would be a great way to introduce those who missed the Venom movie to the character and excite people who did attend the Sony movie. Spider-Man Far From Home is poised to introduce the idea of multiple universes to the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I'm sorry, you're saying there's a multiverse?
A long-standing concept in the comics, the MCU has yet to embrace the idea of the Marvel multiverse. Jake Gyllenhaal's character, Mysterio, claims to be from a different reality connected to the main MCU reality by Thanos' snap. Now, we should be a bit skeptical of this information for a couple of reasons. Chief among those concerns is the fact that Mysterio is a known liar in the comics. However, if he's telling the truth, and the universe in the film is starting to overlap with others, this could be how Venom appears. If Disney and Sony do decide to treat the Venomverse as something totally separate from the MCU, these dimensional mishaps could be the way Venom appears in Far From Home. Again, Mysterio could be lying in a plot to make himself an artificial hero, but this is also the easiest way to get Tom Hardy into the movie. Okay, so far we've been mostly talking about how Tom Hardy's interpretation of Eddie Brock and Venom could appear in Far From Home. While that would certainly be a lot of fun, there's also a lot of clues pointing to a unique MCU version of Venom appearing in the film. As Nick Fury pointed out in one of the trailers for the film, Peter Parker has spent a lot of time in space. Like, considering he's been a superhero for maybe a year in the MCU, he has spent a lot of time off-world. It also just happens that space is where the Venom symbiote comes from. Although Peter Parker and company never visited the symbiote symbiote's home planet while in space, that's not really a limiting factor. Symbiotes can survive in the vacuum of space, and the most common origin for the Venom symbiote is that it arrived on Earth after sneaking aboard a rocket on the moon. For all we know, the alien parasite could have attached himself to Peter Parker while he was in space and is just waiting for the perfect opportunity to make its presence known. After the release of Spider-Man: Far From Home, actor Tom Holland has one more solo movie left in his contract. Once he's done with the role of Spider-Man, Disney and Sony are likely going to have to renegotiate the deal that allows Spider-Man characters to appear in the MCU. While both parties could agree to a similar deal, it seems just as likely that their working relationship falls apart. That's why it's important for all involved to create as much overlap between the Spider-Man franchise and the MCU as possible. The more Spider-Man characters that appear in the MCU, the more difficult it is for Disney and Sony to split.
You're an Avenger now.
So introducing characters like Venom into the MCU would be pretty great for all involved. Doing so would let Sony make the box office revenue of a major motion picture featuring both Venom and Spider-Man, and let Disney profit off the selling of Venom toys. The success of both characters really implies that Disney and Sony would want to build up this relationship. So long as Disney doesn't limit what Sony can do with the Spider-Man characters in the movies that they produce, there's nothing stopping every Sony-owned Spider-Man character from popping up in the MCU at one point or another. Aliens have been oddly central to the adventures of the MCU version of Spider-Man. Homecoming saw the young hero battling against criminals using alien technology they stole after the Battle of New York in the first Avengers film. Then Peter travels into space in the events of Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame. Of course, Spider-Man was also instrumental in the battle against Thanos and his alien army in the conclusion of Endgame. That's why it'd be pretty thematically appropriate for the Venom symbiote to appear in Spider-Man: Far From Home. The MCU version of Spider-Man has spent most of his time dealing with otherworldly threats, and the symbiote would be one of the biggest challenges he could face. Traditionally, the Venom symbiote has a more of a corrupting effect on Peter Parker before the parasite overtly attacks him as Venom. It'd be really interesting to see Peter struggling with his identity as a hero in this film, while the symbiote tries to forcibly change that identity. Even if this storyline doesn't play out exactly as described, it's undeniable that there were plenty of ways for the symbiote to have found its way to Earth in the MCU. Venom as a character more or less requires the presence of Spider-Man in one form or another. To Peter Parker, Venom represents temptation. He embodies the life that Peter could live if he turned away from his principles and instead used his powers to fulfill his baser instincts. Similarly, Venom is entirely based around what kind of monster Spider-Man could become if he didn't care about the repercussions of his actions. Even on a more fundamental level, though, Venom's iconic character design is heavily based on Spider-Man's look. The symbiotes can take whatever shape they want after bonding with a human. This is why fellow symbiote Carnage is just a red, angry goop man after bonding with a human. Venom's design, though, is supposed to look like a more monstrous version of Spider-Man. From the spider emblem on his chest to his jagged teeth to his massive flicking tongue. This also means that Venom's design doesn't work if the alien parasite never meets Spider-Man. To make Venom's current design work, it would be surprising if Far From Home shows the symbiote learning about Spider-Man before bonding with Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock. 2018's Spider-Man: Into the Spider-Verse is a terrific film that firmly establishes why Spider-Man has been a cultural icon for several decades. As such, it features fun new takes on heroes and villains in the extended Spider-Man franchise. However, no interpretation of Venom appears at any point in the film. It'd be pretty easy to include the alien menace at some point in the film, but instead Sony chose to leave the character out entirely. This could very well be because they always intended for a version of the character to appear in the MCU and didn't want too many versions of Venom on the silver screen within the same year of each other. The monstrous anti-hero not appearing in Into the Spider-Verse really does make it seem all the more likely that he will appear in Spider-Man: Far From Home. There are a lot of clues pointing to another surprising character appearing in Spider-Man: Far From Home as well. There's a solid chance that Brie Larson's Carol Danvers will pop up in a meaningful capacity in Spider-Man: Far From Home. After all, in the comics, Carol, then going by Ms. Marvel, was the one to defeat the Elementals when they resurrected. As the extra-dimensional villains are set to be the main antagonists of the film, it makes sense for Nick Fury to call in Captain Marvel with his space beeper. While it would be great for Captain Marvel to swoop in and assist Peter Parker at the climax of the film, a especially after their fun exchange in Endgame, this could set up some issues too. Maybe the symbiote uses Carol as its means to arrive on and bond to Spider-Man. This would probably be used to set up Venom as the main villain in the third MCU Spider-Man film, but a cameo in Far From Home wouldn't be totally out of place. It'd be especially odd if the MCU Spider-Man trilogy wrapped up without Venom appearing in one form or another. The character is central to the themes of Spider-Man and will almost certainly see some kind of appearance in Far From Home before taking on a larger role in future films. What do you think are the chances of Venom appearing in Spider-Man Far From Home? Please let us know in the comments section down below. While you're there, be sure to like this video, subscribe to The Binger, and click on the bell icon so you can more easily catch all of our future videos.